Evan, the headline figure, and I was on air when it happened. I thought, golly, this is better than expected. But what's below here? A lot of people talking about how many sole traders are there. Do we know these are, food delivery drivers, or is that a suspicion? Talk us through it.
It's all of the above. So that is the biggest takeout from yesterday, is that if you actually scrap out sole traders and what's been referred to as micro businesses, so maybe a business that's been started with one employee or possibly two, most likely inside a family, you actually only saw 2,100 jobs increased where an employee was employed by an employer. So that is the takeout from that. On the full-time side, part-time jobs are a bit different, but on the full-time side, that's where that came from. So sole trading could be almost anything. What they're also suggesting is it's actually online services that have really boomed in August, as well as people have been forced home and therefore taking their own initiative and actually starting their own enterprise, inverted commas, with the sole trading idea in mind. So that is why yesterday was so incredible. Participation being up, but what also showed out, probably gets back to your story around what the Treasurer is now alluding to, hours worked realistically didn't move. It did increase, but by 0.1%. So that is nothing in terms of the space. So that means there is still a heck of a lot of people on JobKeeper. There is still clearly a big amount of slack in the market with regards to employment. And that's clear, even with that jobs numbers and disregarding Victoria, because the Victorian story saw about 43,000, just under 43,000 jobs lost. But again, that's very hard to read considering how many of those are actually on JobKeeper and where that actually sits.
I guess on the flip side, even stripping out all those one-offs, still we didn't go backwards, which must be, I suppose, some good news. Where do you see the real unemployment figure at right now then? So
again, if you look at the rate of JobKeeper in Victoria and the rate of JobKeeper being held across the country, the real unemployment rate is probably still above 10%. So that needs to be put out there as what's there. If you look at the hours worked again, those people that are actually on what they refer to as 0 hours would equate to about 3% of the unemployment rate. So you add that with the 6.8, it's probably about 10%. And that's where you currently have to probably put that gauge in there in terms of that real number. Again, the other question that you're probably asking there, Tom, is what happens when the businesses that they are on JobKeeper with actually come back online? Do they come back online and do they immediately fall out? So that's the other question here, is how much of that number...
Yeah. We've got that safe haven at the moment. So basically businesses, even the normal ones that would go bust, haven't. So, there's
exactly. The zombie business
coming.
Is the question. The zombie business
just
is the
finally
question.
And briefly on this, Evan, sorry to do one more topic for you, though. US election, what are markets barracking for here, for want of a better word? Is it just Trump to keep all the tax cuts, or is that a bit simplistic?
Probably a bit simplistic. It's more with regards to the word barracking. It's probably not that. It's more markets are doing everything that they traditionally do in an election period, even with a bombastic president, even with a once-in-a-generation, global pandemic with what it's causing. We are actually seeing traditional patterns in markets that we see from 1928, from the last election back then, all the way to 2016. And that is markets get very, very volatile. They get very, very sporadic. And we actually also tend to see an increase in the US dollar. Now, barring the Aussie dollar, US dollar pair, everything else is tending that way. And what's interesting about this one is that even with the swing states and even with polls showing that people have possibly already made their minds up more strongly than they've ever have before, markets are getting nervous and are looking that way. They were nervous about a Trump presidency, put that out there. They actually originally wanted that as a negative, but his policies, obviously, with regards to tax, were seen as a very big positive thing. This time around, policy is so thin on the ground, it's very, very hard to see that. It's a question, really, what markets are asking, who's the safer hands? And that's the question we're still waiting.